Today, I just want to talk about Rust. This is going to be a very long-winded, passionate rant, so if you want to listen as you're commuting to work or running on the treadmill, I'm just going to talk with you for the next 15 minutes or so. There isn't going to be any fancy visuals or editing like in my other videos. This is simply just my inner thoughts on Rust in its current state. I'm going to tell you why you won't see me make story wipes, even though I want to. And the reason why I think it's significant that we talk about this is because whether you agree with me or not, we all collectively subconsciously know that Rust has some issues. Whether you play the game every day or you occasionally come back to the game to check out some of the new additions, we all know that Rust has changed a lot since 2014. Now, some say that Rust is in the best shape it's ever been, that it has evolved and been polished to welcome new players, but if you're like me and you've played the game for a while, you probably also feel that the game just doesn't hit with the same amount of soul that it once did. And when I critique the game with any level of objective reasoning, it's like players think I'm asking for a specific flavor of the game, when that's not at all the case. Imagine if Rust was that juicy steak you love to order at your favorite restaurant. It's seasoned perfectly with a variety of different sauces for you to choose from, and the restaurant always cooks it to absolute perfection. And one day, the restaurant starts bringing you steaks with seemingly less and less meat on the bone, but it's covered in seasonings. They've added seasonings that you've never had before this visit, and also never asked for before this visit. So, one day, you start leaving Yelp reviews on the restaurant, speaking on your recent experience there, and all of a sudden, people start criticizing you. Well, all you've done was have the expectation that the restaurant that makes this amazing steak no longer makes the steak to the quality or fullness that you've had before. And you're not asking for a different sauce flavor. It's not that you're asking for a different seasoning. You just want the steak the restaurant is known of serving. But because some people have come to appreciate this over-seasoned steak with less meat on the bone, somehow they found a way to villainize you for not loving the steak the way they love it. And again, these people think you're asking that the restaurant change the seasoning or add a different sauce, when really, you're just in love with the thing you've been coming there for, which was the juicy steak underneath all of the seasonings and sauces. You couldn't care less what seasoning or sauce the steak was served with, as long as the meat on the bone was cooked to pristine edibility. And Rust is very much like this analogy of the over-seasoned steak. And even after hearing this, people will still find a way to critique this analogy and say, well, what if I like chicken or fish? As if arguing the semantic of the analogy is a one-up. Bro really think he cooking, or bro really said nothing. As if saying bro before the statement validates the statement. And this is one of, if not the biggest reasons, why I don't make story wipe videos. I don't want to appeal to this type of viewer. You see, I'd love to make some really cool full week gameplay footage, but I'll be honest, I don't know if the type of viewer I could appreciate is still playing the game, and I don't think I'd enjoy playing it either. Let's talk a bit about the severe lack of mystery in Rust. Every wipe, and I mean every single one, is the same as the last. You're gonna spawn in, build a small 2x whatever, run the roads for scrap, and start working your way down the tech tree until you have enough resources to run a tier 3 monument. It's literally the same thing every single time. In the mid-wipe, you're probably going to try to expand your base a bit, maybe look for a bit of PvP, but by this time, half of the initial player population is gone. No one is looking to PvP with top tier gear, and you're already getting raided by 10-man groups. This gameplay loop has become more stale than 3-month-old bread that's been left in the sun, okay? I find more excitement in taking out the garbage than digging through loot crates, hoping, just hoping, to find a Tommy or a SAR. Everything you need to survive a wipe can be made in your base with components and scrap. And it's boring. Rust used to be exciting. Every wipe was different, and the reason for this was because what you found out in the wasteland was always drastically different. The one time you found a pump shotgun or a SAR in a loot crate, and that was the reason you were able to get ahead of your neighbors that built their base down the hill from you, or the times you ran across someone who was genuinely friendly, and you both ended up playing the rest of the wipe together, and actually became really good friends because of the hardship you struggled through during the wipe. But now it's just farm scrap, speedrun the tech tree, and the majority of players you run into are generally the same type of player. Yeah bro, I'm more of a PvPer than a farmer. What? You run the monuments? Nah, I just PvP bro. Hey, can you give me a start? Can you give a guy a gun? I'll go kill some hazzies for you and give you some of their stuff, I promise. It's the same type of player over and over and over again. And I know that's not everyone who plays, but it's become the vast majority. And in the past, you could actually meet a totally new person every single wipe. Maybe you met someone who worked a 9 to 5 and they had a week off, so they decided to hop into the server. Or maybe you met someone who lived in Africa but decided to play on Canadian servers just because they play at night and they grind the game constantly. Sure, he or she might be an asshole, but hey, they could drop a naked from 300 meters. And part of this lack of mystery in the game might be because the game is now more well understood, but it tends to cater to a crowd that doesn't really care about the health of the game, and that's the casual players. You see, Rust is a game that wasn't meant to be enjoyed on a casual basis. Not saying you can't, but it was never really intended to be so. The entire philosophy of Rust was built upon the challenges you would face over multiple days in a row, and it's probably one of the biggest factors that makes Rust such a unique game. In games like Counter-Strike and Valorant, a single match is typically less than an hour, but in Rust, a single match can be a week, 2 weeks, or even months long. That's not a casual commitment that any person can just make. And I know it might sound elitist to phrase the game in this way, but it's the truth. Rust is a game that requires commitment. Have you ever queued into a ranked Rainbow Six Siege game where someone left early? Have you ever hopped into a league match where one of your teammates decided to go AFK instead of play the game? That's practically where Rust is at. These players who enjoy the game casually, which it's no sin in the Bible if you do so, but it doesn't lend to a healthy game if everyone is leaving in the middle of the match. And the reason I keep running into resentment towards making story wipes is because Facepunch, the people who can fix this issue, actively encourage this behavior by neglecting the format that made their game so unique in the first place. It's being treated just like a Call of Duty lobby that players can leave at any moment. Now, if you're still with me to this point in my rant, and you disagree with me so far, ask yourself this. Have you seen a single server retain 80% or more of its original starting wipe day population all of the way through the wipe without the presence of a major content creator on the server? Have you seen a single one do that in the past year? I have not seen a single server even hold more than 60% of its initial wipe day player base for more than just 3 days. Again, without a major content creator on its server. This has been going on since 2022. That's 3 years ago. And yet, people will claim that the game is still in a healthy state. It's been on Steam's top 10 for 10 years now. Yeah, I know. I've been playing since 2014, but how can you justify the health of the game solely on the numbers when nobody even plays the full format of a wipe? Would Overwatch be a healthy game if players left when you switched sides with the other team? Would Valorant still be considered a healthy game if your teammate rage quit after losing the attack side rounds? Can you logically reason that League of Legends is a thriving game if the majority of your teammates went AFK because you didn't want to FF when they wanted you to? I mean, again, if you looked at the numbers, surely you'd expect all of these games to be doing relatively well. But why is Rust any different? Sure, it still sits in the top 10 on Steam, but if the majority of players don't play the full format of the game, how can that be considered healthy? If players are actively avoiding PvP because aimcone destroyed skill-based gunplay, how can that be considered healthy just because the numbers are still up on the Steam stats? Because in my head, all Facepunch has done is switch which audience they cater to. And I've speculated why they might have done this in the past. Maybe it was to maximize on potential profit, or maybe it generally was to introduce a casual audience to the game. And it's good to have them, but if it's the vast majority, I can't justify making a story wipe sound interesting to you, my viewers, if my actual excitement of Rust's gameplay loop is as empty as the Dead Sea. Which brings me to the people who actually have any real say on the game, Facepunch themselves. Now, I dogpile on them a lot, but I do tend to exaggerate my feelings for them because they are in a position of responsibility for the game and us as the community. And since their communication seems to be as clear as mud, I'm going to keep this brief as I've never actually spoken with any of them. Why have they, at the very least, not given us any clue as to when things they promise will happen or what the progress is on any major updates? Every time they release a new update for the game, it's like a crypto scheme that's trying to promote their pump and dump. All we get is vague tweets and obscure community posts, but rarely do we ever hear how far they've come in developing fixes for the basic things in the game. Rarely do we get a glimpse of what's to come with future editions. You hear it all the time. They say, "Hey, we've got some exciting news for you. We've got a new advanced vehicle modification system coming down the pipeline. We're also reworking the tech tree to balance how long it takes to acquire firearms. And we're adding a new NPC vendor to the game that sells nuclear weapons. Oh, and let's not forget, we are finally releasing the hardcore game mode we all know you've been waiting for years." And after they said this, they've released maybe like 1 or 2 things they promised and not spoken about the things that actually plague the game worse than actual AIDS. And I wouldn't have a problem with them at all if at the very least they'd give us an answer or hand the community the keys to making the modifications to the game themselves, the way Fortnite did a few years ago. We've got a whole modded section in the menu, but the only thing you'll really be able to enjoy there are simple minigames, creative build servers, and aim trainers, which is a little pointless now because any baboon with a mouse can control the recoil. Which brings me to my final point of my rant on why I don't, and probably will never, make a story wipe video, is since the game has changed so much already and it doesn't look like the developers are really looking to change, where are all of the people who've quit before me gone? Because I did some research to find out why other people before me had stopped playing Rust, and what each person said has, at this point in Rust's life, been altered or completely fixed to compensate for these players, yet they've not returned to the game. Could it be that what was missing from the game was not completely different flavors of the game? Could it be that adding sprinkles to a pile of doesn't make the taste good? Could it be that what needs to start happening is that the juicy steak we came to order be served with a decent cut of meat on the bone and cooked to edibility? Did the fancy seasonings and sauces really matter in the end? I mean, if the restaurant is still profiting, that must mean it's successful. Surely. Right? I don't know. All I'm sure of is that I'm not leaving a positive Yelp review about them. I'll tell my story, and if people don't like it, well, they can enjoy as much over-seasoned steak as they want to. Thanks for listening to my rant, everyone. Stay frosty.